With only 10 days remaining until the release of Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, can you believe that Nintendo and Monolith Soft still have been releasing new information regarding the game, including some hefty new details about the new story content? Hey everyone, it's Yggdrasiel, and with only a few days to go and quite a bit to discuss, let's both analyze what new information we've been given access to, as well as place my final few hopes prior to the game's release. What's more, an AMA on Reddit by Washington Post reporter and games journalist Gene Park has provided a few more specific answers, and while I won't be regurgitating some of the redundant questions for already verified information, I will be providing a link to the post in the description down below as I discuss some of the new revelations about the Definitive Edition. This video will be mostly spoiler-free with regards to the story, save for the discussion of the new Epilogue content, and I will be sure to give a hefty spoiler warning in advance, as well as timestamps down below for your convenience. Now, just before we get started, as always, if you enjoy what I have to say in this video, please feel free to leave it a like, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and subscribe for more Xenoblade Chronicles, Monolith Soft, and Nintendo content. And with all that said, we've got a heck of a lot to discuss, so let's get stuck in. Now, let's begin by discussing new information presented between Nintendo and Monolith Soft, covering the overview trailer and a few posts over on Twitter. In the Xenoblade X Definitive Edition overview trailer, there actually isn't all too much spoiler-free information that was shown that we didn't already know about. I do believe that at the start, we did finally get to see some footage of weather variants, such as the thunderstorms of Oblivia and the auroras of Sylvalum, and as a reminder, different weather events will give you and your party specific buffs or debuffs related to said weather. When discussing NLA in more detail though, Nintendo has showed off some new gear at one of these shops, the Super Civ Scholastics gear, and when the gear was equipped onto Elma, we can see that it was actually a piece of Nilnal's gear. The Super Civ series of gear previously gave us El Serufe's and Celica's equipment, so it's only natural that a new Clurian party member would also offer us a new gear set as well. And yes, I did say that Nilnal will be a new party member, more on that in a bit. After some discussion of the combat with a really quick and elegant explanation of the Soul Voice system, we get some footage of scale combat with our first look at piloting a Hraesvelg model. As previously mentioned, the GD0930 Hraesvelg ST has a preset weapons and arts arsenal that cannot be modified. In exchange, however, we seem to have some really fun arts to play with. For one, they showed off an art called Hunter's Blow, which not only gives you complete evasion during its animation window, but also forces topple without staggering, also known as breaking the enemy. Following this is a crash course in quests and missions, but we do have some new stuff to talk about here as well. Not about the questing itself, but rather in this scene, who is handing out the quest in particular. And that would be Nilnal herself in the Blade Barracks as opposed to when we saw her initially in Oblivia, and with Celica to boot. With this being a voiced scene where Cross can choose to help or not, it seems pretty clear that this is a late game affinity mission for Nilnal, requiring Celica to be present as well. We can also hear Nilnal for the first time, the Clurians having yet another British voice to add to their roster compared to the rest of the game's voice cast. The fact that we can outright refuse Nilnal sure says something, but we'll just have to see what she needs help with, especially since she needed to come all the way over to the Blade Barracks with Celica in tow. Next up, after some clean HD HB footage, will he ever stop excelling, we get our first shot of the online multiplayer interface, which looks vastly more clean and organized. You can play with friends or create a private squad, but if you want a quick 10-minute adventure, you can take up a quick assignment to join a squad relative to your level and tackle an online mission right away. The online bosses are also present, but instead of the indefinite amount of attempts that you had to fight them in the original, it seems that when an online boss is up, there is a set amount of attempts that you can battle these behemoths. This change may have been due in order to prevent exploiting the fact that you could simply break all of the boss's parts, leave, and then start the fight all over again to max out your rewards, but we'll just have to see if this restriction really will hurt us or not. Given some quality of life that I will talk about later on, I don't suspect that is fully the case. We then get a little more footage showing off what the scout recruitment window looks like now, letting us see our fellow Blade members' class, gear, and profile, and you can see more specific information by using ZR to see their full stats. We can also see just how many credits a contract will cost per hour, so be sure to take your coin purse into consideration as well. Lastly, with the online features, we have our first look at the online mission menu layout, showing off the online missions available to us, their client, objective, restrictions, and rewards. It's important to note that levels will be synced accordingly, and some online quests will restrict you from using your skills, so make sure you have set up your class and gear to what you want to play as before hopping in. Leading into some new hype shots for the main story before discussing the epilogue, we do get one final new spoiler-free shot, now showing off our mysterious masked blade member, now with her headgear off, revealing our first look at Yggdrasiel, a brand new character that joins us as a new party member like with Nil. And yes, I can now say with certainty that both Nil and Yggdrasiel can join us on our journey. We have the game's official Japanese website to thank for this, having been updated when the trailer released to slot in both of these new characters. It highlights Nil as having an extreme interest in the histories and architecture of other alien races, while Yggdrasiel herself is a Skell mechanic and pilot who in the past seems to have worked with a German Skell manufacturing company. Oddly specific, but it's quite nice to see some pre-Exodus Day character building set up. It remains to be seen what either character will use for weapons, but I can absolutely see Nil using a ray gun or psycho launcher, and I can see Yggdrasiel wielding a longsword or a photon saber. And that would be the end of the spoiler-free section of the overview trailer, but just before we jump into the new epilogue information, I do want to address a few other new bits of info that is safe to discuss here, mainly in regards to music. Nintendo of Japan recently presented several small trailers for the game, and while they don't have any new footage, bar having a fun time flying over cauldrons with the Hraesvelg, what is new is a new version of The Key We've Lost, highlighting that we will be hearing more and more new versions, aside from just a change in the Skell flight theme. Some people also believe that Melancholia, which plays in another trailer, has also received a new version as well, but I'm not quite hearing it myself. What I can say with certainty though is that we have the return of Hiroyuki Sawano for the new story music, as well as the introduction of Misake Umase, known primarily for her works on the Pretty Cure series. It seems that this is her first involvement with composing for games, so this will be quite interesting to see. But with that out of the way, let's jump into discussing the new story information, which is quite a doozy and also highly spoiler sensitive, so please, if you are not interested in seeing spoilers, I highly encourage you to pause the video and skip ahead using the timestamp down below to the next section, which is completely safe. If you choose to stop here, well, thanks for watching, but for those of you sticking with me, let's go. This section of the video will discuss both the ending of the overview trailer as well as a new trailer shown off in the game's official Japanese website. Following the events of the Lifehold, planet Mira is facing a new global catastrophic anomaly. Giant, massive spheres, almost like miniature black holes, have begun to appear all over the world's surface. Some of them, according to this map, to be greater in size than NLA itself. Reminiscent of the annihilation events of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and seemingly composed of antimatter, these anomalies absorb everything in sight, taking in the ground, sky, ocean, even the wildlife. Nothing is spared. Footage from the Japanese website for the game shows that these first essentially spawn in as small fissures of orange and purple. For those who've played Xenoblade 1 Future Connected, it looks eerily similar to that of a rift from which the fog beasts come, though that's not quite the case this time around. These fissures implode upon themselves and then rapidly expand, swallowing everything in its vicinity. And if that wasn't enough chaos, these hellish spheres also act as a gateway or a portal that usher in ghosts, one of the two main factions of alien creatures that fought above and destroyed the Earth. Now, knowing that these can seemingly appear at any time and location, it makes much more sense as to how the ghosts could have caught up to the White Whale during its Exodus campaign. They simply don't need to catch up, they can seemingly strike without warning at any time. It then begs the question how Elma knew that the Samarian Federation would come into contact with the ghost specifically in the skies above the Earth, but I digress. As I mentioned before in a previous video, ghosts are considered completely organic life forms embedded with antimatter cores. Hundreds upon thousands of ghosts can swarm out of these rifts, and a single one of them is a genuinely terrifying problem all on its own. That's because in the new footage from the website, regular gunpowder can't even put a dent into one. But even more horrifying is the fact that with a flicker of light, a human, or rather a human's mimeosome, can be disintegrated into dust in mere seconds. But is it really dust? And I ask this solely because all of the Xenosaga fans are feeling a little bit thirsty now from all the salt they may be seeing on screen. Yes, that's right, the ghosts of Xenoblade Chronicles X have apparently become some form of parallel being to the Gnosis of Xenosaga. Without going into too much detail, as I've yet to finish Xenosaga 1, no spoilers in the comments please, the Gnosis are essentially organic creatures from a different plane of existence that are hostile towards humanity. If a Gnosis were to touch a human being, it would instantly decompose them into salt. Which begs the question, are the ghosts of Xenoblade X performing a similar role with the capability to do so without even lifting a finger? Or is there more to it considering that it's not a human being that was just disintegrated, but a conscious mimeosome? Would Elma or other non-human xenomorphic allies be fine? All of these answers remain hidden for now, but I genuinely can't wait to see. The rest of the website footage just highlights the fact that only the Ares can seemingly damage and destroy the ghosts, giving us some incredible combat shots and a much cleaner look at our HD Ares model. As I mentioned with its comparison to the Ouroboros of Xenoblade 3, you can see the cores on its joints and chest much more prominently. Circling back to the overview trailer footage then, we also get yet another shot of the lone hero, still frustratingly hiding their face, but pretty much confirming that wasn't Lao meeting up with the team here as I had previously thought, but our gray-haired mysterious character exclaiming that we should just let it all out and that we earned this tearful reunion. Elma, however, is pondering all of the events going on, from Mira disappearing, the ghost's arrival, and even the Ares, that something has aligned, the dots have connected, suggesting Elma even foresaw all of these events before we had any knowledge of them. Next though, the party becomes bewildered as a massive weapon, a giant spear whose size rivals that of even the Zufarg, mysteriously rises from below the floating continent and is flung upwards towards the open air. What it's aiming at and firing at is unclear, and it unfortunately disappears in the last frame of this clip. But if I had to take a guess, I wonder if it's trying to pierce and shatter this large dome-like barrier we see covering this region. If not, then I have to wonder, is it a weapon being fired at a target outside the floating continent area, perhaps at one of the rifts or even NLA itself? Lastly, in regards to the sphere, some have noticed that it looks similar in design to the highly lethal ether-absorbing spears of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Could this be an antimatter absorbing spear, or is its pronged end simply a nice nod as it targets something else? That's unfortunately all we get to see of the weapon, as we then get 3 last looks at different parts of the floating continent area. The only new thing among these 3, however, as pointed out by Xenoblade R Alpha on X, is that the first clip shows some enemies spawned in this region for the first time, and we can see 2 interesting details about them. First, all of the enemy types appear to be mechanical, such as the massive Galder, and the second detail is that they all seem to have the same color scheme, matching the rust-looking rocky surfaces of this floating area. Sadly, however, this revelation is the last the trailer has to offer as it comes to a close. Now, a few last things before I jump into Gene Park's spoiler-free AMA on Reddit, but I hope that with the new epilogue story seemingly having a focus on the ghosts and Mira itself, at least from what the marketing shows us, I hope that we won't be throwing away any build-up regarding the Samarian Federation. We still don't know why the alien factions chose to fight adjacent to the Earth, but more than anything, I would just like the explanations and answers to be a little more clear with regards to Mira. If we're hoodwinked into another round of it all being something about this planet, I will be sorely disappointed. Now, I don't expect every single answer to be fully resolved. I simply want a handful of the larger and more story-centric questions to be answered, while more purposefully vague questions can simply be given some more detail, or at least feel more resolved or neatly tied in, should we see Xenoblade Chronicles X2 or a Xenoblade Chronicles Y ever be considered. Lastly, I am personally choosing to keep my expectations low with theorizing exactly what's going on. I've pointed out the similarities to the ghosts of the Gnosis, the space anomalies to annihilation events, and the preceding fissures to the fog rifts. I've also mentioned the similarities between the Ouroboros of Xenoblade 3 to the Special Ares unit being piloted by the lone hero, which we've already observed through concept art to potentially be a two-seater Skell. Now, while all of this sounds fantastic and whimsical for theorizing, I have to be honest. So much of this could be purposefully set up to be red herrings, distractions, or nothing more than a coincidental variation of some mechanisms of events that are in other Monolith Soft games, and we are just seeing its iteration in the Xenoblade Chronicles X universe. I've seen everything from calling Mira a simulation to suggesting that Mira is its own pocket universe, similar to Xenoblade 3's Ionios, and with so little time before the game's release and far too many new plot points to mull over into something coherent, I would rather keep my expectations low than expect some massive multi-game, multi-in-universe tie-in bonanza. If that is the case, I'll lose my mind, but I'll get to that when the time comes to see for myself. With that out of the way, it's time to jump into Gene Park's Reddit AMA and back to spoiler-safe discussion. So let's go over the Reddit AMA. I would also like to say that I've had the pleasure of speaking directly with Mr. Park over the last few days, so I'll be adding a little more clarity to some of what was mentioned on the AMA as well. Now again, to temper expectations, Mr. Park is still a reviewer foremost and cannot discuss any information beyond Chapter 4 of the main story. So even if something does not appear early on, it does not mean that there won't be a chance for some features to be present later on in the game, and above all else, we can still hold out on a few items for patches later on down the line. I say all of this to get you ready for a whole bunch of no's, so let's start with those first. With some clarifications, first up, it seems that I jumped the gun when I noticed changed Skell Flight background music. Though we can change the BGM between its original variant, the remastered track, and the remastered track without lyrics, there's unfortunately no option to shut down the flight music entirely, so we cannot simply just listen to the zone's own music. Then we have Nintendo Life misreporting the fact that cars and Skells in NLA had hitboxes, meaning that you could no longer run through them. Indeed, you will still be going ghost right on through them. With field Skell requirements no longer being a thing for most chests, most treasure is up for grabs. We already expected this, but now there's verification that the chests still have their original rewards. If you can reach some of the more difficult to encounter ones early on, you can quite possibly get some better equipment for your troubles. What's more, you don't need to mash the A button to open chests anymore. Simply holding down the button will do. There is no fashion gear for weapons. Like with Xenoblade 3, you can press the left and right bumpers simultaneously to take a UI-free screenshot of the game. While there doesn't yet seem to be a theater mode, there is a story recap option. There are no bonus rewards or items for having save data of any of the numbered Xenoblade games on your Switch. There is no level adjusting menu in this game compared to the rest of the series. Lastly, with the negatives, you are still required to complete an Affinity mission that you have started before picking up a new one or going on with the main story. I'll also throw in my own 2 cents here with this one, because with starting Affinity missions, you should be very careful. Some of them will ask you to go to farther continents like Sylvalum and Kaldros, so if you activate them too early on, you may be in for a little bit of a rough time. At the very least, I would encourage saving in multiple save slots before starting an Affinity mission, in case you end up not wanting to do a particular mission after all, just yet. With the nose out of the way down, let's run down some positives. For one, Mr. Park's statements seem to suggest that online mode isn't really a requirement to getting better late game materials and gear. That's because reward tickets are also available for completing survey percentages of each map, with anywhere from hundreds to thousands of tickets being available simply for continuing to explore the world and chart everything. But that's not all. Each day when you open the game, there will be some reward tickets heading your way as part of your Division rewards, again completely offline. Mr. Park also confirms that, should you not like your Division, there is still the option to switch it out at any time. Tombstones don't appear in this game when defeating tyrants, but to fight a tyrant at any time, all you need to do is reload the area. There does not seem to be a way to change the weather, so fighting weather-specific enemies will still be a bit of a pain. Speaking of enemies, there is an in-game enemy index which discusses everything about the monster in great detail. You can see its classification and category, level range, which region they are in, what time and weather you can find them in, how much experience they reward, and what materials they drop. With regards to party member restrictions, you'll actually find that there are far less actual restrictions, as in they are pretty much gone, save for when the story will specifically restrict them. Other than that, start up any other kind of mission with a party of your choosing. The only caveat is that you still need to meet affinity requirements for certain characters to start the quest, so better get to that affinity grinding. Lastly, and most importantly, more important than any other piece of information I've presented to you thus far in any of my analyses, the lobsters have been nerfed. I repeat, the lobsters have been nerfed. Thanks to the changes with finding items that you need, the blood lobsters can be found by looking for red marks on the map. To my fellow OG Blade members, I will never forget our pain and suffering. To my new Blade recruits, have fun figuring out whatever the hell this means. And that is the most important and new information with regards to the definitive edition that Gene Park shared on his AMA on Reddit, as well as some clarifications with me personally. Mr. Park will be creating his own review when the scores come in, so I'll be keeping my eye on that to hold my hype over until release day. And while we haven't seen anything for a theater mode, I am still going to be holding out hope. The same with a level adjustment tab. Both of these can still appear later on in follow-up patches, so here's hoping. The idea of patches may also bring in line some new content, though DLC hasn't been announced obviously. I still just want to hold out hope that we may still see more new things added on as time goes by, simply just that. Those are just some of my last minute thoughts and hopes for the game, but with less than 10 days until release, things are really heating up. I wouldn't even be surprised if there is one final marketing trailer once we hit the 7-day mark, but that's as far as this video goes. Thank you very much for sticking with me to the end, but please tell me, what are your final hopes and thoughts before Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition releases? Will we see some answers at last, or will we get lost in yet even more story plot points? Are you a new member of Blade joining the fight for humanity's survival on planet Mira for the first time? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and remember to please give this video a like if you enjoyed what I had to say, and subscribe for more Xenoblade Chronicles, Monolith Soft, and Nintendo content. With all of that said, thank you again very much for watching this video, and as always, have a great day.